Hey, baby girls. I got a new story for you today. New day, new story. So we have, if you were a kid during the Civil Rights Movement. So this book's going to discuss how things were a lot different a while ago now, about 80 years ago, when blacks were treated separately. They had their own bathrooms, they had their own schools, and they weren't treated fairly at all. Some would say there's still a lot of that going on. There's a lot of racism still going on. It's evolved, it's a little bit different, it's kind of complex, but this will at least introduce you to those concepts as you're younger. So if you were a kid during the Civil Rights Movement, it's going to talk about how your life might have been different, I believe. So let's see. And you have Black History Month coming up, and that's February, every year in February. So maybe something you discuss at school. So this will give you some insight so you'll know what they're talking about at school. So it says, a different way of life. The Civil War, which took place in 1861, it went from 1861 to 1865. It freed African Americans from slavery. But then in the 1960s, a century later, they were not treated as equal citizens. They did not have civil rights. Laws in the southern states kept black and white Americans apart, or segregated. Imagine being an African American kid at this time. You would attend a different school than the white kids. Your school would be in poor condition. You wouldn't be allowed to eat in restaurants that were only for whites. Instead, you would order your meals at the back door. On buses, you would have to sit in the back seats. Segregation was allowed under law, and things were supposed to be separate but equal for white and black people. But though life was separate, it was not equal. African Americans were determined to be integrated into society, and have equal rights. So there's a picture there of them educating you so you get smarter. Meet Connie. This is Connie Underwood. She lives with her parents and her older twin brothers, Robbie and Tommy, in Oklahoma. She and the twins have always been very close. She loves to climb her favorite tree to read and think up in its branches. Now she really has some thinking to do. The twins have a secret. Maybe that new boy who moved into the house behind hers can help solve this mystery. Meet Mark. This is Mark Jenkins. His family used to live at an Air Force base in Washington, D.C. He has to get used to a new school in Oklahoma. His old school was integrated. That meant African American kids and white kids were in the same class, but his new school is segregated. Every kid is African American. School starts soon, and Mark wants to make a friend before then. It's not easy being the new kid. So he was used to a school that was integrated, meaning that blacks and whites went to class together. And now he's in a school that's segregated. It was a hot August evening in 1963. Connie grabbed a soda and headed outside. She climbed her favorite tree and hid in the shade. Her brothers' voices floated into the backyard. She heard them use words like sit-ins, marches, and civil rights. Connie did not understand what it all meant. Her brothers were up to something, but what? Equal rights for all. Amendments to the U.S. Constitution guarantee certain rights. The end of slavery, protection from danger, and the right to vote are some of them. But many African Americans did not have these rights in the 20th century. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was formed in 1909. This organization works to protect the rights of African Americans and make sure they are treated equally. Here's young men head to a sit-in in Oklahoma City in August of 1960. Sit-ins were often organized by the NAACP. You see those pictures? That's an actual picture of it happening. Mark sat on the porch of his family's new home with two books. He was slipping back and forth between a mystery novel and the Green Book. Mark had started reading the Green Book during a long drive from Washington. His dad said they would have starved in the South without it. As he read, Mark thought about the friends he had left behind. The Green Book. African Americans traveling to the United States used the Green Book to plan their trips. This book was published from 1936 to 1964. It listed hotels, gas stations, and restaurants that welcomed African Americans. The book was very important to these travelers before the Civil Rights Movement brought change. A New York Post office worker named Victor H. Green wrote the Green Book. So to be safe and to make sure that they had the amenities that we're used to now, they had to go to just certain places that allowed them. It's pretty unfortunate. It's pretty gross. Connie spotted her new neighbor. She climbed the fence into his backyard. They introduced themselves, and Mark told Connie about his move from Washington. Connie looked at her new friends' books. "I see you like mysteries," she said. "I sure do," Mark answered. "Maybe tomorrow you can help me solve one," Connie said. Then she explained what had been going on with her brothers. "I have a dream." Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most well-known civil rights leaders. He was famous for leading peaceful protests. In 1963, thousands of people attended his march on Washington to support civil rights. King gave a speech at the end of the march. In it, he said, "I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers." When Dr. King spoke, his words moved people to action. So again, here's actual photos of Dr. Martin Luther King during one of his speeches. That night, Connie heard the twins talking in the backyard. "It's on for tomorrow morning," Robbie said. "We meet downtown in front of Joy's Ice Cream at 10 o'clock. They'll think twice about not serving us," Tommy said. Connie's heart thudded. Her brothers were planning to demonstrate. She had heard that demonstrators often got hurt. Some were sent to jail. "Would you give up your seat?" In 1955, Rosa Parks boarded a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. As the bus filled, the driver ordered Mrs. Parks to give up her seat to a white man. She refused and was arrested. African Americans boycotted the city buses in protest. They walked, used cabs, or carpooled instead. After 381 days, the city of Montgomery agreed to let African Americans sit where they wanted on buses. Rosa Parks sits on a bus after the boycott. So that was pretty brave of Rosa Parks to stand up and say, "That's not right, I should be able to sit here too." The next morning, Mark watched Connie climb over the fence. "We have to hurry," Connie said. "I think the twins planned a civil rights demonstration downtown. I want to make sure they are okay." Mark hesitated. He was afraid, but he wanted to help his new friend. 9 brave kids in Little Rock in September of 1957. 9 African American students volunteered to attend an all-white high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The state's governor refused to let them enter. President Dwight Eisenhower sent federal troops to guard them on the way in and out of school. These brave students are known as the Little Rock Nine. The Little Rock Nine are escorted by soldiers at the end of the school day. See that? What they did was so brave that they had to have people come protect them to make sure that they were going to be safe. Connie and Mark ran downtown. African American teenagers were marching on Main Street. Rows of marchers shouted, "Separate is not equal." They filled the streets like the town's high school band did before a big football game. Only these teens were not smiling. Connie and Mark squeezed through the marchers and looked for the twins. They have signs that say, "End segregation and freedom now." A first grader makes history. In 1960, first grader Ruby Bridges became the first student to integrate schools in New Orleans, Louisiana. The U.S. Supreme Court had already ordered all schools to integrate, but most refused. Ruby's parents enrolled her in a white school. White parents didn't let their children attend class with Ruby. She had a teacher all to herself. Neither Ruby nor her teacher missed a day of school. Ruby Bridges is escorted by U.S. Marshals to protect her from protesters. Look at that. Can you imagine that? She's just your guys' age. Just a first grader. She had to go to a school where she wasn't welcome. It's a pretty brave thing she did. White people with angry faces watched the demonstrators. Some shouted ugly words. Connie remembered her parents talking about the African Americans who rode in the front seat of buses from Alabama to Mississippi. They were hurt badly by angry white people. Could that happen to the twins? Suddenly someone shouted, "Police!" Connie knew the police sometimes hurt demonstrators. She grabbed Mark's hand. Police violence. The civil rights movement angered many white people. They did not want African Americans to be treated equally. Sometimes they became violent. African Americans could not rely on the police for protection. The police usually took the side of the racist white people. Police attack a protester in Washington, D.C. Look at that. You're allowed to protest. That's completely legal. He has the right to do that. The police should not have harmed him. They should have stood up for his rights to protest, to peacefully protest. This was only Mark's second day in a new city. He'd never seen people so angry. "We need help," Mark hollered. He and Connie squeezed to the back of the marchers as fast as they could. Then they sprinted to Connie's house. Mark's heart thudded with each step. He hoped Connie's mother would know what to do. Church bombed. On September 15th of 1963, members of a church in Birmingham, Alabama were attending Sunday school class. A bomb went off and killed 4 young girls. White men who were members of a violent racist group were to blame. The African American community was devastated. The explosion shocked the city. Family members outside the funeral for one of the girls killed by the bombing. So super dangerous still. Black people had no place that they could be safe back then because honestly people were terrible. They were terrible people for not accepting them for who they are just because of the color of their skin. Connie quickly told her mother about the twins. Mrs. Underwood was angry, but not at the kids. "Let's go get your brothers," she said. "They are trying to do the right thing, but they should have gotten a permit first. Then the police wouldn't be able to arrest them." Civil rights on TV. In the 1960s, many families bought televisions for the first time. They watched the evening news programs. They could see and hear exactly what was happening to protesters. More people learned about the civil rights movement. They would travel from all across the country to join demonstrations. Viewers watched Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders deliver stirring speeches on TV. So that's when we first see the TV, and it's being used back then for good to spread actual news so that people could be well informed. A few weeks later, Connie and Mark marched between the twins, and their parents were right behind them carrying a parade permit. Now the police couldn't stop them. As they marched past Joyce Ice Cream, Connie looked at Mark and the twins. She knew they were all thinking the same thing. One day, we'll walk right in the front door. We'll order ice cream sodas, and we will twirl on those red-top stools. The Civil Rights Memorial. The Civil Rights Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama honors people who died fighting for civil rights. On a stone wall, water flowed across words from Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech. The words say that African Americans will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteous like a mighty stream. The name of 40 civil rights heroes are written on the memorial. So there's a picture of the memorial. You can kind of see it. Their sign says equal rights for all. This has important cities of the civil rights movement. So we live, here's Iowa, so we live right here. So look at that, just a couple states down from us was Arkansas, and then a couple states over, Birmingham, Alabama, and Montgomery, Alabama are the two cities there in Alabama that were talked about a lot in this book. The South, they wanted slaves. They didn't like the black people at all. The North, they didn't want slavery, and they were quicker to accept blacks into their communities. In the back there's some words to know, and there's also a timeline. I know this is pretty heavy stuff, but it's important that you girls know about it. I love you very much, and I hope you enjoy this book, and I'll talk to you again soon. Love you girls. Bye.